The Diamondbacks offseason is on hold as they mull what to do with Ketel Marte. We'll talk about that and what the market is doing in reaction to that on this episode of the dbacks Under Review podcast. And hello everyone, and welcome back to another dbacks Under Review podcast. I am your host, Mike McDermott, publisher for dbacks Under Review, which you can find at dbacks_underreview.com. You can check that out after listening to the podcast. So, opening up this episode, the Diamondbacks offseason remains on hold as they figure out what they're going to do with Ketel Marte, although it's looking like the movement on the infield market has given us a direction on where that's going. Of course, I've already talked about this, and we've been talking about the Marte rumors pretty much every podcast episode for the last 3 weeks, because right now there are only 2 players that have been linked to the Diamondbacks in any sort of offseason trade or free agency rumor, and that's Alex Bregman and Ketel Marte. And unfortunately, because the offseason is on hold, we're just waiting for things to play out. There's just nothing going on. Like I said, I don't even think the Diamondbacks were particularly relevant over the weekend. Is in reporting. The last thing anyone said on Ketel Marte was basically December 31st, where John Gambador reported that there were 5 teams still listed in on Marte, and it sounds like I wouldn't be surprised this week is the OBO. If you can't hit me with your best shot, if you don't have anything, we're moving on, because it looks like to me that the market is moving on in regards to Marte. Kazuma Okamoto signed a 4-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. I know the Blue Jays were a team that initially checked in on Marte, but I don't think they were linked since the winter meetings, probably because Arizona set a high price. And the Red Sox are out, based on what Bob Nightingale reports. Of course, I consider Nightingale's report coming from the Arizona side, considering that Nightingale is the BBWA. It depends on, it changes each year, but he's basically the top, he's either the chairman or the president on a given year, but basically he's the top guy in the Arizona Baseball Writers Association America chapter. So he clearly has, his sources are coming from the Arizona side of things. So with Marte's off-season holding up the Diamondbacks, like I said, they don't know what they're getting in the deal, and because they don't know what the deal is, they're not close to any deal. That has not changed. Nothing has changed on the Marte front, and basically since December 18th. It's pretty clear to me that they're not going to get what they want in a Marte trade. Now, of course, it could. I don't know if interest will spark back up once Bregman goes, because the latest we talked about the latest reporting on Bregman will certainly, I think, start pushing the infield market. Bregman and Bichette are obviously the top 2 names on the market. Bregman isn't attached with a qualifying offer. Bichette is. So when you consider draft pick compensation, the type of money that you have to spend, and Marte certainly is a bargain compared to the 2 infielders. When you look at present day value, $73 million on the CBT payroll versus what could be $160 million for Bregman and 200 plus for Bichette. So that's why I still think the Marte trade saga isn't necessarily over, even though I and everyone else with some sort of vested interest in Diamondbacks in 2026 and how they do is probably hoping that he remains with the team, because the Diamondbacks don't really have much of an option. If they trade Marte, their lineup is going to suffer quite a bit. And even if I were to get the pitching back, now, of course, the Diamondbacks, I think, were top 10 offensively. If you go by park-adjusted metrics, they had a 110 WRC plus for the season, 109. That's something we can look up quickly on Fangraphs. But you're losing your best hitter. So the Diamondbacks are 8th in position player WAR on Fangraphs. 8th in WRC plus 109. Of course, they're also one of the better base running teams, so you have, obviously, most of your offense value is going to come from the bat. And with the Diamondbacks 2025 lineup, Nelson leads the team. Ryan Nelson, minimum 0 plate appearances. Leads the team in WRC plus. Gotta love that 49 small sample size. So anyway, 500. We'll talk 500 plate appearances. So we talk about guys that have gotten it. So there are 5 plate appearances guys in 2020, 145. You had Marte at 145. Carroll at 139. Perdomo 138. And then Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who's not going to be much of a factor to start the 2026 season, 95. Of course, league average is 100. When we look at WRC+, it's on a percentage scale, with 100 being the average. So if we lower the threshold to 300, that includes Suarez and Naylor, who are not coming back. Moreno is at 117. I had mentioned Moreno as a breakout on the previous video. Didn't get a lot of run, obviously, the last video, but once you're done listening to this one, you'll want to listen to that one as well. It's a very important video. You'll want to listen to that after you listen to this one, because Hazen's got a lot on the line this offseason. He's got to navigate Ketel Marte trade rumors for one, and then also find a way to figure out how to make this pitching staff work. And right now, if you ask me, the current pitching staff as is not good enough. I think they could survive with the rotation, but their bullpen is a downright disaster. But I've talked plenty about the bullpen. We won't be spending much time on this one. Hopefully, like I said, once the Marte stuff resolves itself, we get a bit more of a clear idea on what the team is going to do. So again, like I said, the market is going to decide, in my opinion, what the Diamondbacks are going to do. Like I said, Bregman could be coming off the market soon if the reporting in Boston is true. Now, of course, Buster Olney of ESPN reported that the Red Sox have made an aggressive offer on Bregman. And Marino Pepin, who's, I guess you could say he is connected to the Red Sox. His brother is the Spanish play-by-play voice for Boston. So they might have some connections in that regards. It's sounding like the Red Sox are upping their offers of Bregman with 5 years and $160 million on the table. Now, I know Pepin has a... these Spanish names are difficult to pronounce when your English is a first language, but I'm sorry if I butcher it. But it sounds like Bregman has a 5 and 160 on the table, and it's just how it's going to be structured is going to be the thing. Obviously, there's deferrals, there's opt-outs. Although I think Bregman's looking for a long-term guarantee, so I don't know if he's going to take a short-term deal again where you have opt-outs. I could be wrong. He's going to be 32 before the next season starts. So he's right around the same age as Marte. I think he's 5 months younger. So with that in mind, it might be a situation where Bregman wants the long-term deal and no options or whatnot. So with that in mind, if Bregman's market is 5 years and $160 million, the Diamondbacks can't afford him. There's no chance. And of course, for those paying attention, we've already known that. The Gambador reported way back in December 18th that the Diamondbacks are waiting for Bregman's price to come down, and if Bregman has $160 million on the table, it's not coming down. Like, they can't fit a $32 million cap hit, even if we were to trade Marte's $14.6 million from the luxury tax, because then that's a jump of nearly $18 million. Diamondbacks are at 205.9 according to Roster Resource. So if you were to trade Marte for minimum salary players, you're looking at a sizable jump of, let's say Marte gets you 2 minimum salary players, 1 reliever, 1 starter, although it's unlikely. The Diamondbacks would only save about $13 million on their payroll by trading Marte, because you have to remember he's being replaced. Even if you have to replace with minimum salary players at the minimum. Now, if the players coming back in the trade have a different salary, you have to count that in there. So at most, it's $13 million. Bregman, if he's coming in at $32 million, that's a net increase of $19 million. $19 million on your CBT number, which would push it to $224. And from what Kendrick said in September, they were not going to go over the 220 figure that they were at mid-season 2025. Now, of course, that could change, but I don't think Bregman is necessarily the type of player that Kendrick was going to open the wallet for. This is not a Corbin Burns situation. Corbin Burns is the type of player you would open the wallet for, because he has the best starting pitcher track record from 2021 to 2024 compared to anyone. Now, of course, over that stretch, the second best pitcher you can argue is Zach Gallen. And Gallen, coming off a pretty rough year, could have to sell for a short-term deal, but we can talk about that at the end of the episode. So with Bregman, the Diamondbacks I would have to say the Diamondbacks at this point are out on Bregman if he's got $160 million on the table. And with the Blue Jays already making a big infield signing, if Bregman goes back to Boston, that takes out 2 suitors for Ketel Marte. Now you got, I assume Tampa Bay might be considering it. The Mets were a team that weren't necessarily ruled out. Those are two teams. I don't know if either team's going to be willing to offer it. Like, the Mets don't necessarily have the space to fit Marte in. Where are they going to play him? The Mets are planning on playing Jorge Polanco at first base, which is weird, instead of just making him a full-time DH, which would be better, and Marcus Semien at second base. Where's Ketel Marte going to play? I can't imagine that they play Marte at a position other than second base or DH. I don't think it would be a good idea for them to make Marte a full-time DH if you're going to trade for that contract. Although, again, $5.73 is not a bad DH contract. We saw what Schwarber got in the open market, and that was $150 million from the Phillies. Now, of course, Schwarber hit twice as many home runs as Marte in 2025, but the difference is Schwarber's a low-average, high-walk masher. He's going to hit 240 with 50 bombs and 100 walks, and he's going to strike out 180 times. Now you look at Marte. Ketel Marte is a guy who's going to hit 280 to 290, walk 10 to 13% of the time, and strike out about 15% of the time, compared to Schwarber striking out a significant amount. So Marte makes fewer outs than Schwarber, and that's how he makes up the gap, the power gap, by making fewer outs than Schwarber. Now, of course, I think Schwarber probably has better numbers than Marte. If you look at WRC+, Marte was at 145. But over the last 3 years, the edge goes to Marte, 140 to 135. If you look at the last 3 years, I have written about this multiple times for heavy posts talking about Kyle Schwarber. So Schwarber was 152 in 2025. So you consider the fact the guy who hit twice as many home runs as Ketel Marte had a WRC+ that was only 7 points higher. Now, of course, Schwarber had 724 plate appearances, so his home run rate's not even double what Marte has. So that's why I think the Diamondbacks certainly could get offers on Marte. If teams are trying to fleece the Diamondbacks, I think that, like I said, the ask on Ketel Marte, the Diamondbacks discuss Shane Baz and Ryan Pepio in the winter meetings with Tampa Bay. The reporting out of Seattle is the Diamondbacks asked for an established starting pitcher, which I have to assume is Bryce Miller, is the pitcher they were targeting, plus multiple high-ranking prospects. So we're talking Urangelo Sanja, Cade Anderson, Lazaro Montes. I don't know if they discussed Colt Emerson as well. I would assume he was I assume that he might have been considered part of the ask, but if I was Seattle obviously would balk at a Colt Emerson inclusion because the timeline's kind of set up for him to replace J.P. Crawford at shortstop in 2027. Emerson should get his first major league at-bats with Seattle in 2026. So that's the reporting on Marte. And it sounds like the Diamondbacks are asking for a lot, and teams are not willing to offer a lot, which doesn't necessarily hurt the Diamondbacks because, again, you have a team-friendly contract with Marte. There's no way that goes underwater. $91 million with $41 million deferred. 10 years after he plays. So the present day value is $73 million when you account for deferrals and the value of future money. The Diamondbacks certainly would love to have a 140 WRC plus hitter in their lineup. And if you look at 2026, they might have two, depending on how viable you think Corbin Carroll's power breakout is. And to be honest, I'm not sure what a ceiling would be on Corbin Carroll's offense. 40-40? I mean, how many seasons of that we had in Major League history? 5? I know Juan Soto and Jose Ramirez almost did it, but there's only been 5 seasons in Major League Baseball history where you've had 6. I forgot Shohei. 6 seasons in Major League Baseball history of 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases, and certainly that's a target that Corbin Carroll can hit if he gets really hot in 1 year. Because we saw Carroll do 30-30, despite the fact he had 15 steals going into the middle of August. So yeah, 40-40 seasons. You have Ohtani in 24, Acuna in 23, Soriano in 06, Alex Rodriguez with the Mariners in 98, Barry Bonds, because Barry Bonds has done just about everything on a baseball field in his career, and Jose Canseco. It's kind of interesting that you have 3 guys with PED links. Soriano's case being literally just an outlier season out of nowhere. And then, of course, Acuna had a 41-73 season, not two seasons ago. And then, of course, Ohtani is the first and only member of the 50-50 club. So you look at the Diamondbacks lineup, you still have Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte as your main power threats. Assume if Marte were to play more than 135 games, we're talking 30 home runs. Marte's a 30 home run bat, so is Carroll. And that's going to be your primary power threats in the Diamondbacks lineup, batting second and third. And of course, you have the high OBP Perdomo. Perdomo could put up a 400 on base season, potentially. Depending on how things go, like I said. Diamondbacks probably 1 through 3 are right there with anyone. Maybe I'd take the Dodgers over them, but with Mookie Betts kind of dropping down a little bit, I think the Diamondbacks 1 through 3 certainly is capable, depending on what you get out of Perdomo, because I'm not entirely sure that Perdomo is going to be able to repeat that 2025 season. It seems like a total outlier. Of course, it's kind of ironic he wasn't an MVP finalist despite leading Baseball Reference National League players in WAR, which is the best value metric that they've come up with so far. Well, of course, there's obviously some issues with WAR, but that's a different topic for a different day, and I'm probably not the best person to break it down. That's just my little rant. It's like lead the National League and be WAR and don't even get an MVP finalist, and some writers, especially that have covered a team that shares your complex, won't put you on the ballot, which is silly. And I've actually talked to that writer before. I won't give the name, though. Everyone knows who he is. So anyways, going back to the, obviously coming back to off the rant, if Bregman goes, I think the likelihood the Diamondbacks keep Marte increases, even if there might be a little bit of a panic, because then Bichette's going to go, and there's a lot of big market teams lining up Bichette. It's lining up probably as much as Boris would like. Wait, no, sorry. I take that back. Bichette is not a Boris client. He is with Vayner Sports, who represents Jordan Lawler as well. Sorry, that's my mistake. Bregman's the Boris client. And Boris is probably happy if he does have a $160 million offer on the table. I am not. I don't know how valid that is, and I don't have the sources to figure that out. Not my problem. So, considering the latest reporting, it feels like teams are moving off Marte. I think he's going to be a Diamondback in 2026. His 10-5 rights kick in, the Diamondbacks don't necessarily have the leverage to trade him at that point, which it'll be interesting to see how things shape in that Diamondbacks clubhouse with Marte having trade protection, essentially, across the league just 10 days in the season. Now things could change. I wonder what Diamondbacks would do to replace Ketel Marte if they did move him. So let's move on to another topic. A topic the story that I wrote about for Heavy.com, Heavy Sports, which is my new home for baseball content. I'm covering not just the Diamondbacks, but I'm just covering kind of like the big baseball news on there as well, because it's pay for clicks type job, unfortunately, because I'm an idiot and destroyed what little baseball reporting career that I had in the last 2 years. But we're still doing strong. I guess we're still doing strong. Like I said, the YouTube channel is doing pretty well. Again, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button. Smash that subscribe button because each extra subscription increases the likelihood, even though I have no power over that outcome, of Corbin Carroll producing the first ever 40-40 season in Diamondbacks history. He's coming off the first 30-30 season in Diamondbacks history. So hitting that like button increases the odds that Corbin Carroll is going to do something amazing next year, because we don't know what the ceiling is. There is no ceiling on Corbin Carroll's career other than the Hall of Fame. That's about the appropriate ceiling. So again, a piece on MLB.com. The MLB writers, it was Jesse Borick, who Diamondbacks fans should be familiar with. He does a prospect overview every Sunday, which is funny. I actually was offered that back in 2019, but I think, like I said, the way things worked out, I think it worked out better for everybody else. So, David Hagaman is listed as the Diamondbacks prospect breakout candidate in 2026, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of season he has. So, 2026, Hagaman should have virtually no restrictions on workload, or certainly significantly less. He's coming off a 2025 season, finished his recovery from an elbow surgery and internal brace UCL revision surgery right before the 2024 draft. Came back in June. and then was traded to the Diamondbacks in July. And then, if you're interested, like I said, on the dbacks Under Review YouTube channel, I have not only the 4 separate post-game interviews that I did with David Hagaman in the Arizona Fall League, I have a full compilation, a 13-minute video. You can get all of them together, including the long interview that Jack Summers sat for 5 minutes for while I was waiting, because I'm more of a talk for 2 minutes type of guy when it comes to these things. And also, there's not much to discuss when you in those particular things as well, and it's kind of like, I guess in Hagaman's case, it's going to be the closest thing to what it's like pitching in the big leagues, where every time you pitch, start a game, the media is going to be all over you after every game. And I guess that gave him a little bit of a sample of that in the Fall League, because I think it was, I talked to him before the Fall League on Media Day, and then I talked to him after his first start in the Fall League, which was actually not on a start day, and then 2 more. Third time was a start day as well with Alex Weiner, and then the last one was on the last game at Salt River Field. So I wanted to make sure I grabbed them before their season ended, because Salt River wasn't very good in the Fall League. Their only top 100 prospect, Charlie Condon, I have questions about still, but that's something for Rockies fans. This is not Rockies Under Review. This is D-backs Under Review. We talk about the Diamondbacks. Rockies are only relevant when the Diamondbacks play them, or they are tangentially related to the subject, like it is here. So, from what I've seen from Hagaman's velocity is kind of up and down in the Fall League. It's not too surprising, because you have pitcher elbow surgery, then you're pitching under restrictions. He didn't throw more than 69 pitches in the 2025 season, and then you have the time off between the end of the minor league season and the start of the Arizona Fall League, which is about 3.5 weeks, because you had the first Sunday of September was the end of the Hillsborough season. And then the Fall League his first Fall League start was October 9th. Of course, I remember that game because I got soaked because I forgot the umbrella in the car. It was raining all weekend that first week of the Arizona Fall League. Although that was pretty nice. Like I said, the weather the rest of the way was pretty good. Like I said, the 2024 Fall League was hot. This one was not. This year was more pleasant. So, from what I've seen from the Hagaman, you're looking at mid-90s fastball. He averages around 94, 93 to 96, and he topped out at 96.9 on October 31st. He had that. He got to 96.9 on of course, when you look at the Arizona Fall League, don't take the pitch identification verbatim. Of course, it's one of those things you kind of have to understand certain pitch shapes and understand what the pitcher's arsenal is, which in the second Hagaman interview, he does talk about his entire arsenal, which is four-seamer, gyro slider, curveball, changeup. And Baseball America lists Hagaman's curveball as the best curveball, which is kind of interesting. Diamondbacks have 3+ quality curveballs in my rankings. Hayden Dirk and Daniel Egan certainly are in that range, although they kind of feature more of the up and the 12-6 variety curveball, where the ball just breaks straight down. If you look at Dirk's arsenal, I actually profiled that on my newsletter. Dirk is a rising four-seam fastball, death ball slider curveball guy. Sharp drop, sharp vertical drop, steep, depthy breaking balls. And then Hagaman's slider is kind of like I said, kind of that Dylan Cease slider, where it's a slider that doesn't break. No horizontal or vertical break. It's close to 0-0. Basically, it's a pitch that drops with maybe a little bit of glove side sweep. Like we're talking less than an inch. I forget what I had. I think I had him at 0. I'll have to check the numbers, but I do have his pitch charting from the Arizona Fall League. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it up in a timely fashion. And yes, I can. It'll depend on how fast this browser uploads. Unfortunately, it's not cooperating. All right, here we go. So I'm looking at David Hagaman's pitch count, because I literally manually charted 216 different pitches. This is inefficient, to say the least. I think Prospect Savant also does it in a much more timely and digestible manner. Like I said, the spreadsheets are for me, myself, and I. Although I do share it from time to time. So Hagaman's slider is minus 0.3, so it's basically a 0 slider, vertical break, and 2 inches glove side. So he calls it a gyro. Like I said, it's got a little bit more sweep to it. So it's kind of interesting. Like I said, the changeup, I think, because he's got 2 good breaking balls, the changeup's going to be a huge 4th pitch for him, because then that's something he can throw away to arm side to lefties. It has some fading action where he can bully them in with 4-seamers and sliders. So, like I said, with Hagaman, it's a question of how does this stuff look when he gets deeper into games. So he's going to pitch more than he's going to be probably closer to 80 to 85 pitches. It's going to be more likely his 2026 limit in pitch counts, and they're going to probably play him along slowly at the start of the year and then ramp him down late, because the Amarillo season is a week longer than Hillsborough. It won't be long before he gets into Amarillo. I think it's a case where they give him 5 starts, and then if he looks as good in his next 5 starts as he was in his last 5 starts with Hillsborough, he's going to be in Amarillo. Or maybe he has a really good spring and they screw it, put him in there. And we look at that Amarillo rotation, you got arguably the Diamondbacks' best 3 pitching prospects in that Amarillo rotation. You got Daniel Egan, who's probably going to be their opening day starter, and then depending on what Hagaman does, he's going to be there before middle of June, in my opinion. And then you got Ashton Izzy, who's a guy that kind of falls under the radar if you're not a Diamondbacks prospect fiend. So I think Izzy is probably the second best pitcher the Diamondbacks picked up at the trade deadline, depending on how I feel about Brandon Garcia. And I've said I have a lot of expectations for Garcia, who also came in that trade. The Josh Naylor trade is looking pretty good. I said Izzy's got what makes Izzy interesting is, like I said, he's got a very deep arsenal of at least solid to above average offerings. I think I saw a thing on X that it's like Ashton Izzy's Stuff Plus metrics was one of the best in the minors. Of course, you have to be careful with these. You can't take the models necessarily for verbatim, but he's got a very deep arsenal of pitches. You look at the Stuff Plus. He's got mid-90s fastball, sinker, a cutter, slider, sweeper, change. He throws everything. And it'll be interesting to see how that arsenal plays in Amarillo, because he's going to be pitching in Amarillo in 2025. Of course, we'll get back to Hagaman after I get through this little bit of a tangent. It's like, subscribe to D-Backs Under Review for tangents on players completely unrelated to the topic at hand. But anyways, like I said, Izzy and Egan Hagaman are going to be probably 60% of the Amarillo season. Going to be part of that rotation. Like I said, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Diamondbacks handle those 3 specific pitchers. Like I said, there was a bit of a shakeup with their pitching development, getting Jamie Bleish from the Pirates, because the Pirates are developing way too many young pitchers that they can't put rotation spots to. I think they traded Burrows in that 3-team trade to get Brandon Lau. So it's like, okay, this guy's doing something right. It's like, can we poach him, bring him here, see what he has to offer? And if he has something that we can use, can we use that to improve the pitching pipeline? Of course, I think the reason Diamondbacks have a private pitching pipeline is they're just not scouting pitchers particularly well to begin with, and also they've been drafting too many hitters. Of course, Hazen's always been better at developing hitters. If you look at his time in Boston and Arizona, the Diamondbacks certainly have quality hitters out of the draft. You look at, I guess you can say Pavin Smith's okay, considering the fact you talk about a top 10 pick that in a bad draft that figured out at least a semi-regular major league role. Now, of course, I think 2026 is going to have a big say in whether that has any legit staying power or not. He's going to be in his age 30 season. I feel like he's at, I think, is physical, where you have the physical mental peak put together. And then, of course, Dalton Varsho is considered a hit, and then the Diamondbacks turned Dalton Varsho into Gabriel Moreno. Of course, I say Moreno. We ought to also include what Gurriel's provided to the team as well, but Moreno's obviously the headliner in that deal. I guess he can. I guess with Alec Thomas, you can kind of hope he's still there if he figures out ever how to swing at strikes only and then hit the ball in the air. I wonder if those two things are tangentially related, because Thomas his plate discipline isn't very particularly strong, especially against non-fastballs and break. I guess you can say he stretches them vertically, but Thomas is kind of and McCarthy are kind of like hit or miss. It's like maybe they're not hits necessarily. You look at that 18 draft. Corbin Carroll, obviously in 2019, is a big massive hit in that 2019 draft. And you hit on a player of that magnitude, it really doesn't matter who else you draft, even though Nelson was also part of that draft class. In 2020, they drafted one hitter, and he's kind of still a prospect, AJ Vukovic. Then 21 through 24, they have gone 24 through 21 through 24, a lot of hitters. Lawler, ADC, Del Castillo. They drafted Bliss, who became part of the Seawald trade. In 22, Drew Jones, the biggest wild card in the system. He could be a guy that is literally a lot of variance. He could either be a top 5 prospect or top 30, or not even a top 30, depending how you feel his bat going in there. I think it's one of those things, if Drew Jones just clicks at the first half of 2025, his prospect ranking with the team instantly goes top 5. Because the Diamondbacks don't necessarily have a center field option long term, and Jones is already better defensively than the guys they have now. I'm not sure the Diamondbacks have an above average defender in center field. I consider McCarthy average, and I don't know how I feel about Thomas. The metrics are getting worse every year. So, that if you're ever living up in the Texas Panhandle area, there's going to be a lot of talent coming to that Amarillo team. Obviously, Hagaman, I think, is the best prospect going to Amarillo. I think if you look long term, although I still would rank Egan higher because I feel more confident in my Egan starter projection than Hagaman, although Hagaman throwing 100 and something innings in 2026 is going to do a lot. Of course, we had to guard against his strong sample size at the end of Hillsborough. Again, he had a 35.5% strikeout rate versus a 5.3% walk rate, which is excellent. Well, I'm going to see how that holds up against better competition. Like I said, Hagaman's much better, has enough strike throwing that he can dominate the lower minors. It'll be interesting to see how he's able to handle the lineups 3 times through, because he's going to be throwing 80 to 85 pitches. How his stuff holds up for 5 to 6 innings. He never threw more than 5 innings in a start, and that was a game he basically steamrolled Everett for 5 innings, putting up video game numbers. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a soundbite out of both Charlie Pagliarini and Johnny Formello, unfortunately, in the Arizona Fall League. I wish I could, but it didn't work out. Although it did work out the way the Fall League thing went. For the paying subscribers, I did actually run into his former catcher in the Arizona Fall League. Ben Hartle is like, I was sweating out that final game because I didn't have anyone I wanted to talk to from what was the team that lost? I know Surprise won it all. Surprise won the Arizona Fall League, and they pretty much dominated it for a long time. I think the other team was Peoria. Peoria was the other team because it was Seattle. So I was actually sweating. It's like, oh crap! I don't know anyone in Peoria that's face Hagaman that could tell me what it is. I got nice soundbite from Joe Lampe the day before. Well, I had to track him down, but got a nice soundbite from him, and then I talked to Hartle, which was like a blessing in disguise because he did catch 2 of Hagaman's games for the trade to the Diamondbacks. And that's pretty much what I have to say on this one. So thanks everyone for watching. Again, if you enjoyed the content here, you made it all the way down to the end. We're 33 minutes into this recording. It's like, congratulations. It's like you're doing a lot. You're holding it in there a lot better than most. Fortunately, the Ketel Marte saga almost seems to be over. Like I said, I would put money on him being in the Diamondbacks lineup in 2026. But I'm not actually going to put actual money in there because my YouTube channel hasn't monetization yet. We're at 53 subscribers at the time of this recording. I don't know if that increased. That Bregman podcast video that I aired out a couple ago is still going strong. So we're going to try and see if we can hit full monetization by the end of the 2026 season. Not sure how we'll cover that year. Like I said, it's only January 5th. So we still got 2.5 months before the regular season starts. I'll worry about that when we get there. Like I said, hopefully we get to 100 subscribers before Merrill Kelly throws out the first pitch of the Diamondbacks 2027 season in Dodger Stadium. So again, I think next time out we'll talk about Zach Gallen's free agency. Hopefully we get a conclusion on the Marte stuff, and we'll see where we go from there. Like I said, there's a lot of offseason left, and there's still a lot of players on the board, both in free agency and the trade market, that could help the Diamondbacks as we come out there. Like I said, as those moves come out, make sure to go to dbacks.underreview.com. Again, that is my newsletter, although I have been slacking on writing the newsletter stuff because nothing has particularly happened in the last 2 weeks. And I've been basically recording the podcast, and that's about it. But again, dbacks.underreview.com, no hyphen like the team name. As you can see it flashing on the screen at the bottom. And again, like I said, you're everything you do to help support this endeavor. Like I said, reading the newsletter, watching the YouTube videos, every second that matters. They track this stuff. And hitting that subscribe button. It's like those are all the things you can do to help, and none of those things cost money. Well, except for the the paid parts of the newsletter, although I usually just leave that under the analysis and prospects umbrella, because I don't think reporting the news should be necessarily paywalled. That's my opinion. So, thanks for watching.